Jesus said, "Come." His disciples followed him to a place called Caesarea Philippi at the foot of Mount Hermon. When he got there, he asked them, "Who do people say I am?" One of them said, "Elijah." Elijah? That's an amazing answer. To Christians, Elijah's a great Old Testament prophet who was faithful to God. That's true. But to a Jew, it's more than that. Elijah is the pattern, the prototype of the rabbi with passion, intense commitment at all costs. He climbed up Mount Carmel and had a contest with the prophets of a pagan cult, climbed back down, oversaw their punishment, climbed back up, prayed passionately, climbed back down, and then ran 20 miles ahead of a chariot. Gave everything he had. That's Elijah. If people were confusing Jesus with Elijah, he must have been a man of intense passion and devotion to the Lord. And his disciples who wanted to be like him would have had the same passion. So how would you translate that commitment, that fire, that total devotion to a Greek culture where leisure and pleasure are the order of the day? Well, they did, in an interesting way. Come, let me show you.
No, I said it's possible.
Okay, can y'all hear me? Am I okay?
Yep.
Okay. All right, up here visiting with everybody and not paying attention to time. Okay, we're officially on the right DVD this week, and so that's good. And this is a very good one. There it goes. This is a very good one, maybe my favorite so far. But let's have a prayer and we'll get started on this DVD. And it's about 22 minutes long, so we'll have a good discussion at the end of it. And so let's pray. Let's pray. Father, we're thankful for this day, and we're thankful for all your blessings. We're so happy to be here this morning and to study your word and strive to be more Christ-like. And we ask you to bless this time of study, bless each one here, and bless those families who have lost loved ones and those who are going through a time of sickness or illness or what's bothering them at this time. And help us all as we go through this life, and we know you're there. And bless this time of study. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Okay.
Jesus said, "Come." His disciples followed him to a place called Caesarea Philippi at the foot of Mount Hermon. When he got there, he asked them, "Who do people say I am?" One of them said, "Elijah." Elijah? That's an amazing answer. To Christians, Elijah is a great Old Testament prophet who was faithful to God. That's true. But to a Jew, it's more than that. Elijah is the pattern, the prototype of the rabbi with passion, intense commitment at all costs. He climbed up Mount Carmel and had a contest with the prophets of a pagan cult, climbed back down, oversaw their punishment, climbed back up, prayed passionately, climbed back down, and then ran 20 miles ahead of a chariot. Gave everything he had. That's Elijah. If people were confusing Jesus with Elijah, he must have been a man of intense passion and devotion to the Lord. And his disciples who wanted to be like him would have had the same passion. So how would you translate that commitment, that fire, that total devotion to a Greek culture where leisure and pleasure are the order of the day? Well, they did, in an interesting way. Come, let me show you. We're on the main street of a city that at the time of the disciples was called Aphrodisias. Now, none of the disciples came here that we know of. So I can't tell you any stories about them, but we do know that in the first, 2nd century, there was a community of people who followed Jesus. Disciples, Christians, they were beginning to be called. And they were here. It's an amazing city, really. Take a look at the gate. This is called a Tetrapolon. It's a formal gate into the area of Aphrodite. Just look at the beauty. Notice the variety of columns, flutes, spiral flutes, some that are just smooth, the different capitals at the top, the different carvings on the gate itself. And you begin to see that this was not only a wealthy place and a powerful place, but this was also a city of artistry and of art. But we've come here for a different reason. This helps me to appreciate the power of the city, but there's something here that helps us to appreciate how the early disciples could communicate the message that Jesus had entrusted to them or to their teachers. So come with me. This is why we're here, even though none of the disciples were. We need to see how they fit into this part of their world. What's interesting, by the way, is that the Jewish disciples would have had some experience with this, because there were 2 arenas, at least, in Israel. One's in Caesarea. It's huge. It's much bigger than this. Apparently Herod built it. Part of it's washed away. It's beautiful today with the Mediterranean waves washing up on it. That was huge. And then there's one, if you remember, in Scythopolis. where, much smaller, but where Jesus walked every time he walked to Jerusalem, he would have walked right by there. There was another there. So they did have some sense of what this part of their world was, although, of course, there are none in Galilee where Jesus taught his disciples. This is a Greek stadium, but it was used at the Roman period when the disciples were in the area, or the disciples of the disciples. It seated about 30 to 40,000, has 24 rows of seats. You can see the entrances for the athletes on both ends. And notice the royal box, the place where the king or the governor or the ruler of the games would sit. Pretty impressive. Picture it in your mind with 40,000 fans screaming for whatever's going on down here. The question I have for you, for me today, is this. When Jesus called disciples, they understood that the model for the intensity, the passion, the focus that disciples had, the model was Elijah. But how do you say that to a culture that never heard of Elijah? Well, I'd like to suggest that those early disciples drew their image, their picture, their metaphor for their new disciples who were not Jews out of what they knew about games and athletics. The point of sport was not simply the spectacle for the spectators or to determine who was the best at something. The purpose of sport was to declare God, their gods, to be great and awesome. When the emperor began to be thought of as God, he used the games to say to the world, I'm God, and I'm king of the universe. And the athletes ran, in a sense, to say to the world, we declare that he is Lord and God. They were religious. So in a sense, it's amazing that the gospel writers, the Bible writers, would use that imagery because of the pagan religion. On the other hand, because people knew the games, it communicated powerfully. Let me show you what I mean. Olympic Games, especially those designed to declare to the world that Caesar was God, Domitian, let's say, started with the emperor's entrance. So picture 40,000 fans, and coming through that opening, the emperor. Maybe he's wearing the uniform of a Roman soldier, gleaming in the sun, the red crest back on his head, maybe walking, maybe on a white horse. Or maybe he chose the robe of a Greek god, Zeus, or the Roman Jupiter, that sash across the chest to say, I'm the king, and I'm divine. Watch him come in as 40,000 fans stand to see the Son of God come in. When the emperor came and took his place in the seat of the Lord, the royal box there, decrees would be made. His herald would stand with a copy, and he would address the people gathered from the local communities, and he would say things like, these are the words of the great, divine, supreme, whatever. And then he would tell them what they've done right and what they've done wrong and what they can expect by way of reward and punishment. Because after all, he is God. And in the games, the emperor is acclaimed. So imagine all these fans standing as the emperor stands, and the ephebe choir from the local gymnasium gathers around him. And the priests of all the local religious cults stand around him, and they begin to chant his praises as the crowd acknowledged his deity officially. In the Olympic Games, the emperor would stand and open that case that he had and take out a scroll or a document that would be read to declare the games were open. He alone could begin the games that declared his deity. And then, the great event that declared more than any other that Caesar is God, the horse race, chariot race in some cases. Imagine horses with 4 colors. And then the participants parade. Imagine athletes from all over, dressed in white robes, coming in procession by communities, walking around as the crowd chants for their favorite. and assembling before the throne, standing with palm branches in their hands. And they would give their lives to the God of the games and declare that their running was to show the world who is God. And it's in that context, I believe, that Paul draws on the imagery of the games. He knew the games. He knew the point of the games was to declare to the world that Caesar is God. So to Paul, the follower of Jesus is a runner. Someone who runs to say to the world, Jesus Christ is Lord and God. Listen, you Galatians, you were running a good race. Who cut you off? Or how about this one? I fought the good fight. That's arena language. I finished the race. That's Olympic language. I've kept the faith. For Paul, the walk with Jesus is an Olympic event. And you and me, we are his athletes. Called to walk after the teacher, the rabbi, the Messiah. Not just because he calls, but to say to the world, watch how we run. To declare to the world that he is king. Or how about this one? You say it after me. Since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders us.
Let us throw off everything that hinders us.
And the sin that so easily entangles us.
And the sin that so easily entangles us.
And let us run.
And let us run
with perseverance. The race that is set before us.
The race that is set before us.
We are, in that metaphor, God's Olympians. We got into games because he chose us, not because we earned it. And that's different. But once we're in the games, God desires that the way we live, the way we try to be like our Rabbi Jesus, becomes a flat-out, all-out run. Don't you know, Paul says, in the race, all the runners run, but only one gets the prize. So run like you want to win. Hear me. How do we dare dabble in the Christian walk? How dare we take discipleship as a part-time stroll in the park? How dare we quit? How dare we let up? We are God's Olympians, and our run says to the world that he alone is king. So run! 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 Burns in my soul. That's Elijah. I tried running in high school. I was lousy. They timed me with carbon 14. You know why I was lousy? Because I always held back. I don't want to cross the finish line at the end of my race and have the Lord of my game say, what you got left? I have to tell him that I didn't give it all. I want to end that race by the grace of God and cross that finish line and say, I have nothing left. And that's a radical message in the world of contemporary Christianity, where we kind of crawl through our faith sometimes. God wants Olympians. The passion of Elijah is captured in people who train and run. Now, bless God, you don't have to win. Some of you may be much faster runners than I. God doesn't care. Paul doesn't say run and win. He said run like you want to win. He wants you to give the best you've got. Some will run faster and some will run slower. We just have to run. And if you can capture that, then you understand what made the rabbi, teacher, disciple model work. Those people were consumed. I like Elijah with the fire. But there's another piece. Remember what we quoted? Since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us run. Do you remember where that is in the Bible? Hebrews 12. What's in Hebrews 11? The great heroes of faith. It says they are our witnesses. And I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that those great men and women of the past are our fans. They finished the race already. And they're sitting here watching us in a picture sense. Run. Now I want you to look out at the stands and I want you to pick them out. Look, there's Elijah saying, come on. You can do this by the grace of God. I did. He gave me what I needed. Keep running. And there's David, and there's Bathsheba, and there's Abraham and Sarah, and there's Isaac, and there's Ruth, and there's Peter, and Philip. And they're saying, come on, don't quit. What are you going to tell them when you cross the finish line? But you know what else? I don't think it's too much of a stretch in the picture to say that also in the stands are the great heroes. By hero I mean those who've lived for Jesus with all their might, famous or not, of your life. You see, when I sit here and I think about my walk with Jesus as a run around this course, you know what I see? I see my mom saying, come on, keep running, take another step. And I see my grandparents. Who do you see? A mom who died when you were little. A cousin, a brother, a sister who died way too young. A grandparent you loved with all your heart. Look at them. They're your encouragers. I'm not saying they can see you. I don't think that's the point. I think the point is you're supposed to picture them as your fans. Look at them. Run, they say. Don't quit. It's worth every effort you make. When times are tough and other runners seem to be passing you by, hear him saying, come. And I don't even think it's too far of a stretch to suggest someday, if he doesn't come, you and I are going to sit in these stands because we'll have finished the race. We got in the race because by grace he made us his athletes. But we will have run faithfully. And we become the witnesses for those we leave behind, our children, our grandchildren. You know what? If that's how we're supposed to be thought of, maybe we ought to start now. What if instead of criticizing and cutting down and undermining, we learn to say, come on, I'll run with you. Keep running. I think the biggest barrier to being a disciple, a true disciple, that is someone who is genuinely like Jesus as his grace enables, the biggest barrier in the world you and I live in is that it takes this kind of fire. That's how Elijah is translated into the world of the Greeks.
see if I can knock this off again. But this is, to me, is one of the best DVDs that he put out because I can identify with it so much. And I should have hollered at Mark to get these lights. But last week on that fill-in video, what was the message from it? Walk like or how Jesus walked. That was last week's message to us. This week we're supposed to be running. And this is one of those things. Oh, Elijah, when you read those verses, he'd made a good marathon guy, I think, because he could run. And but the message that I get from this is what? What's the message you get from it? What?
Finish the race.
Finish the race. Okay, to do that, you got to put out some effort. That's the word I was looking for. Each of us can put out some effort, like whatever fits our life at this stage of life. Now, I was a pretty good athlete. I played football through college, and I could run pretty good. If I made it to the finals in 100 in a track meet, I had a good track meet. If I got a point, I had a very good track meet. But I wasn't one of those guys that would win every 100-yard dash there was. And I wasn't one of those guys being this stocky that could run the mile and win it. But the effort was there to run to get me in better shape for football. That's the why I ran track, is to help me in football in the fall. And so the effort was there. Now then, we just finished up chapter 11 in Hebrews. Pat did a very good job with chapter 11 and the faith that's in of all the individuals that's in that chapter. And then you get to the first two verses in chapter 12, and it says, we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. Throw off everything that entangles us, every sin that entangles us, and let us run the race that is set before us. Now then, last time I taught this a couple of years ago, I got very emotional. I hope I don't today, because right over here is where my grandma and grandpa Purcell, mother's parents, sat. Back a little further is where Grandpa Keel sat. I never did know Grandma Keel. She died of diabetes before I was born. Right up here on the second row is that end is where my dad always sat. Right up in front of him was Uncle Clint. And they were twins, but they were both serving as elders. And I asked them years later, Daddy and I were talking, and I said, you and Clint, y'all sat up there on the first two rows. Did y'all sit up there because you just wanted the church to see you, or why did y'all sit there? And he said, they both big guys, and they said, well, that's the coolest place in the auditorium. So, and they built this thing, oversaw the building of it, and the way this AC's put in, it kicks cool air this way. When it hits those vents up there, more cool air goes this way than this way, and it rotates back up to the return air. So if you're hot wherever you're sitting, move over in this area, and it'll be a cool area. If you're cool, move over right over in this area. It's going to be warmer in this auditorium. And reason I sat over here, that's where us kids sat when we were kids. We all sat where I sat over in there. That's just a habit, I guess. And so I see grandmas and grandpas, uncles. Mother always sat along in this area with some other ladies. And I see Loman and Mona Ruth Jennings sitting right here. B. Ruth is there, here. She moved around a little bit. And I can name other people of me growing up who I put up there as great witnesses that I see, that I was taught by, and helped me grow up to be the Christian that I am today. And so years ago I said, I see ghosts in this place all the time. Not really ghosts, but memories of people. And that is, see, Martha's shaking her head. Her mother-in-law, she was just a great lady. We shared the same birthday date, and she was a great gal, and just, you know, right now there's a couple of people here that I share the same birthday with, and so that's connections that we have with people who helped us develop and grow into Christians that we are. And I always like to tell about B. Ruth and Pete. Pete was her husband. Pete was teaching us on Wednesday nights, high school class, junior high and high school class. And he had us to read verses and we'd talk about them and so forth. I didn't know until I was asked to do B. Ruth's funeral, and Pete had already passed on, that Pete couldn't read. And here he was teaching that class. And we never knew Pete couldn't read. But him and his wife, B. Ruth, would sit on the porch, and she'd read that chapter that he was going to go through over and over, and he would make some little notes on paper or something, or I don't know exactly, because he always had this piece of paper. But we never knew he couldn't read, but he taught a class and did a very good job, because B. Ruth was helping him teach us. And so we don't have an excuse not to be in that race running. So when we get to the point of going through, the message I want to get out today is, how do we reach people? And how do we get across to people as we go through the life of being a Christian here in Burnet? How do we make contact with them? How do we influence them? How do we tell them? There's so many directions this can go. And it can be going out fishing with somebody or whatever. You both like to fish, and you wind up spending the day out fishing, and you get to discussing whatever, or take the opportunity to discuss. There's so many ways to talk to people. We just need to do more of it. And in Galatians and 2 Timothy and Hebrews 12:1, it talks about, run the good race. I fought the good fight. I finished the race. I finished the course. I kept the faith. I can think about guys who were very poor track people. And they usually stick them in the 800 or mile. And they might be a freshman or sophomore. But those guys never quit. They kept on running. And they finished the race, and I admired them so much for their effort. And so when we run in a race as a Christian, don't ever criticize somebody like I get a chance to criticize Mike because he's a better song leader than me. No. I like to sit close to Mike because I think I sound better by sitting close to him. Whatever your talent, however you can do whatever, put the effort into it and run that race. And I'm thankful that I finally got to the point of getting back up teaching a class. Because I needed to, myself to get back in the race of doing more stuff here at church. And so run that race. It is so important to take a breath and get back in, because your race isn't finished till when? Yeah, till your life is ended. And just like B. Ruth, she was out in a nursing home. I like talking about B. Ruth. No matter how many times you went and visited her, and she would ask about whoever, and we just have a good visit. And then she would say, "Do you think I'm going to heaven?" And I would say, this was my standard answer. I said, "B. Ruth, if you don't make it to heaven, none of us are." Because she and Mona Ruth, their husbands had passed on, but that didn't slow them down. They were always cooking something, taking it to somebody, just always busy seeing after people, and just doing a great job. And they lived out in the country through the pasture, half a mile from each other, and they were always doing something. And so run that race. And those great cloud of witnesses, I don't know who y'all's great cloud of witnesses are in your life. There's many people who have influenced me over 72 years, and you hope you have influenced others, that and when they think about something, they think about you, that's something that you did for them. And so be that witness, be that person that somebody thinks about. Rex Lashley's uncle, Philip's uncle, Coon Johnston, he was always doing something, usually teaching our junior high school class on a Sunday, or he'd take us kids to go somewheres or whatever. And when he passed away, I told his daughters, who were, one was my age and the other one's a little older, I said, if there was any individual in my life that I would like to have as a dad, besides my own dad, it would be your dad. And because Coon was a good guy. Now, you see Rex running around here doing whatever. Rex is a good guy. And he's fits right in. So is Philip. They fit right in with that Coon Johnston mold of being a good guy and doing lots of things for the church. So old Coon's a big influence. His real name was Howard Johnson. I don't know how he got stuck with the name Coon, Koon, but that's what everybody called him. And so that's another great individual that I grew up with here. And when we wanted to do something as a bunch of kids, he said, "Well, let's go." And he was off running with us. And so, great guy. Now then, Vandrveer said, "We are God's Olympians." With the Olympics just closing today and all that stuff, and you've seen the effort given by some of those guys who are in the races, in the skating, skiing, whatever, and they barely get across that finish line. The old guy who won the I can't remember the race 4 years ago, but she got bronze this time. And as soon as she crossed the finish line, she just fell to the ground, and she is just heaving so hard because she had run or skied and just gave it all to get to that bronze win. And I can think of a few times. I mentioned one last week about when that old Sal FFA project of my brother's got after me when I was in the 3rd grade, I was running for my life. That's the way I was thinking, because she was right behind me. And that's the only time I ever had the fear of something's fixing to get me like that. And but I can think of some times when effort came into play. When I was playing football, we was in Nebraska playing and starting the second half, and we had a 14-0 lead. And it wasn't the University of Nebraska; it was a smaller college. And they come out. We kicked off to them. They got the ball on the 20, and they ran a sweep. They sent a guy in motion to the weak side, which transferred that to the strong side then. And I was strong side linebacker, and Leon was a weak side linebacker, and they blocked it good. And their little quick running back, he was down the sidelines going 80 yards for a touchdown. And my pursuit angle, I was the last one chasing him. And I'm first thought, I might as well quit because he's a running back and he can outrun me, but he couldn't. I was barely gaining on him. So I tried to get all I could out of myself. And on the 10-yard line, I dove and clicked his heels together, and he went down on the 3-yard line. And everybody's excited that I caught him. And I said, all right, guys, they're not scoring. And they didn't. And after that, we had the game won, and it was just the start of the second half. So you never know what your efforts are going to do. There's times I could go through a story of helping a teammate that was a freshman, and I was a senior, and he was from Lampasas, and he was that close of going home after a practice because of what happened in that practice. And a smaller guy who was a junior was beating him in the techniques and stuff that we were going through. And I just saw that look in his eyes because I'd seen it before in other guys. And I said, Pickett, get out here in the middle of the floor. I said, you don't know how to block. And so I get him out there and I start talking to him. And then old Pritchard, the guy who he was going against, says, no, Keel, don't tell him how to do that. He'll kill me next time, because he weighed him 30 pounds. And I said, get out here and let's teach this freshman how to block. And we did. And he wound up being all conference and everything and blocking for Wilbert Montgomery, who played 8 years in the pros. And as a freshman, when he came to Abilene, he scored 28 touchdowns. And Hubert Pickett was blocking for him. And just because a teammate kept a freshman from going home, now then what happened? He stayed in Abilene. He coached for a few years. He became a principal, became an assistant superintendent. Last I heard, he was superintendent in the Dallas area, all because a teammate put out a little effort to help a teammate. That's as simple as it gets. And so effort and run your race is so important to do. And so everybody's talking, opening doors, so we're through. Thank you.